and welcome to today's webinar, BERNINA Embroidery Software 8, Creating Monograms. You can submit questions by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation. Our presenter is Debbi Lashbrook. Welcome, Debbi.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome everyone. Our topic today is creating monograms in Software 8 specifically. And we're going to cover some monogram conventions, where to place monograms, how large they should be, things like that. And then you have 3 handouts on creating monograms. One will be using the Monogram Docker to create a basic monogram. We're going to also create a single embellished initial, and we'll create a monogram border from a machine stitch. During the class, you're also going to learn how to create a pattern and also create a monogram border. For monogram conventions, if you're embroidering sheets, generally you're going to place the monogram in the upper center of the hem, and the base of the letters goes toward the hem, and usually this is about 4.5 inches tall. If you're embroidering on a pillowcase, you want it also in the center of the pillowcase, on the front of the pillowcase, obviously, with the letters pointing out. If you're embroidering on towels, it's placed in the center generally, 2 to 3 inches above the border, and it's generally 4 inches tall unless you are working with a bath sheet, and then you can make it 5 inches tall. Again, these are just suggestions. You can violate any one of these conventions, of course. For hand towels, they're also placed in the center, about 1.5 inches above the border, and they're smaller, 3 inches tall. And then washcloths are 1 inch tall and about 1 inch above the border. For table linens, whether we're talking about a rectangle or a square, generally it's going to be in the corner and it's at a diagonal to the corner. A napkin, think about how you're going to fold it, center it on one side or place it diagonally as you see in this picture. It's going to be 1.5 to 2 inches tall. For pajamas and robes, it will be placed on the left breast pocket or the side in case the pajamas don't have a pocket. For dress shirts, if you put initials on your cuff, they're placed on the left cuff about 2.5 inches from the buttonhole to the letters, and about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch above the top stitching on the cuff. They're generally about 3/4 inch tall. And if you're embroidering on a pocket, it's generally going to be about about 1/2 inch tall. And it can be placed in the center or off to the side. When we talk about one-letter monograms, traditionally a single letter is the first initial of a woman's name, but it's the last initial of a man's name. If you're working with a 2-letter monogram, it's the first name followed by the last name, and they can either be the same size or the last name can be slightly larger. For a 3-letter monogram, it's first, middle, and last initial if all the letters are the same size. If you want the middle initial larger, that is generally the last name. And if it's married couple initials, the first initial can be either the woman or the man, and then the other initial, the third initial, would be the other. Traditionally, the man's initial was placed first and then the ladies, but now it's usually reversed. If you have a 4-letter monogram, for example, you have a double last name or a hyphenated last name, the first name initials are going to be on the far left and far right, with the larger initials in the middle. Generally, the first 2 initials are the woman's name and the last 2 are the man's name. If you have a prefix in your name, such as O'Donnell or McDonnell, you would use the M for in McDonald or MacDonald. A V is used for Von or Van, and if your last name is O'Neill, you can use the O or the N. Again, these are just conventions. Those can be changed. Now we're going to look at the monogramming docker, which is part of software 8, and the program will open to this docker when you click on the monogramming icon in the digitized toolbox. You have 4 tabs across the top, and we'll be working with each of those tabs. You have different monogram categories that you can choose from. This first one shows initials, ornaments, which are the decorations, and then a border around the monogram. You can also choose, if you wish, just letters and a border, or you can start out with initials only. So those are the 3 basic styles that you can work with. I wanted to let you in on a few changes. You probably have seen them if you've done much work in monogramming. And this has been an update from software 8 or 8.1 to 8.2. It used to be in software 8 and 8.1, if you took a style of monogram and you changed the ornaments, and this is for design categories, the design would take on the color as well as the size of the initial ornament in the monogram style. Now, when you select that same design, it takes on the color of the design actually, as well as the size of the design. So you can always edit them to go back to this size as well as back to that color, but it will change the color as well as the size in software 8.2. So let's go ahead and look at the lesson. The first monogram that we're going to do is editing just a basic monogram. And in the digitized toolbox, click on monogramming. And the monogramming docker opens on the right side of your screen. You'll see the 4 tabs, and it opens to the design tab. And as you scroll through this list, you can see that the first monograms have letters, ornaments, and borders. And then you get to the other style with just letters and border. And then finally, you get to letters only. So we're going to go back up here and choose this first style, and it is placed automatically on your design screen. Now, you can go to the letters tab and highlight those letters and type in your particular initials. And the software will automatically update that particular monogram with your particular initials. Now, this is ready, as simple as that, to send to the machine if that's what you want to stitch out. But if you want to make changes, you certainly can make changes, and there are a lot of different changes that you can do. But this monogram is ready to send to the machine if you so wish. You can make a change, say to the style, and you can decide, no, I would rather have this style of monogram. So all you need to do is select that style, and you can see the letters automatically updated. I can also go to the Advanced tab, and I can change a lot of things in the Advanced tab. Say, for example, I wanted my letters wider. I can change the width, enter the value of 120, and press Enter, and my letters will get wider. I can also change the baseline angle if I wish, and I can click on the drop-down arrow, and the software will rearrange the letters. With some lettering, the letters that you choose don't look spaced accurately. Well, you can hold down the Alt key and select just the lettering. The Alt lets you select just the lettering part of the monogram. I'll go up to Reshape, and then I can click and drag on the pink diamond to move the letter so it looks like it's more centered. That is called kerning. Next, I'm going to go to the Ornament tab, and I'm going to press Escape, and I'll select the monogram again. Again, everything is selected. You can see everything is selected in color film as well. I'll go to the Ornament tab, and let's say we decided we want to change this ornament. I'll click on Change, and I can choose from Patterns or from Design. I'm going to choose from Design in this case, and it opens by default to the Monogram Ornament category. I'm going to click on Show in True View to actually see the way the letters or the way the ornaments are going to stitch. And the ornament that I'm going to select is this one, M059A. And when I click OK, the ornament comes in, and notice that in this case, it's the same color as the original ornament. This is a pattern, not a design. The change that I told you about in the PowerPoint was if I would have selected from design. Now, I don't like the ornaments there. So if I go to the Advanced tab, I can change the position of those ornaments. I'm going to deselect 2 and 8 and check 4 and 6. So you can see the ornaments are now repositioned. I also want them a little bit larger, so I can unlock the proportions, and I can change these to 0.5 and 1.5. And I'll press Enter to activate that change. And you can see that the design has now increased in size. If I want them a little bit further from the lettering, I can also change the margin, and I'll press Enter to activate that. We're not going to worry right now that they are on the border. I'll make some changes in the border a little bit later. Now let's say that this fancy, or this satin stitch, we wanted to add an elastic fancy fill. And you can do that. You have to kind of work in this order in order to get that accomplished. So I'm going to open up my effects, and I'm going to click on Elastic Fancy Fill and place a check mark by Elastic Fancy Fill. Now I want to change the type, and I want a single row with scaling. Notice how the visual updates when I make a change. I also want to change the actual style, and again, the preview updates. And then I'll click on Apply. Now, the change has not taken effect, but if I hold down the Alt key and select my ornaments and come down here and click on Elastic Fancy Fill, you can see that now that satin stitch has changed. And then you can close the effects menu. Now we can go on to the borders, and I'll deselect and then click on the monogram to select everything. Remember, the Alt key will only select one element of your ornament, your monogram. So with this selected, I'm going to go to borders next, and I can actually add up to 4 borders. I'm going to select Add Twice to add the 2 different borders. And let's say that we first of all want this border to be further away from the lettering. So I will select border number 1 in my Docker, and by increasing the offset, I can move that border further away from the lettering. The offset for the first border is the distance from the lettering. Now, I can also change that first border and put a fill in there. And notice that it actually took on the properties of the Elastic Fancy Fill. I don't want that type of fill. Instead, I'm going to choose Blackwork Fill. And if I want to change that particular type of Blackwork Fill, I'll click on Properties in the Advanced tab. Here I have lots of different choices, and you can scroll through these choices and choose one that you like. The one that I used is B0040A, and I'll click on, excuse me, I'm going to change the size of this to 0.25, and I'm going to do that to the X value, the Y value, the column spacing, and the row spacing. And then click on apply. And you can see that the type of pattern updated. So I'll go ahead and click OK. Now for this next border, I'm going to zoom in here so I can show you that the outline is not tucked under this satin stitch. And I really want it tucked under that satin stitch. So I'm going to choose my border number 2. And this time I want to decrease the offset. And that brings border number 2 closer to border number 1. And that way it covers up the outline of stitching. If I select border number 3 and change the offset, and in this case, I'm going to increase it because I want it further away from that second border. So I want these just to butt up next to one another. So now you can see that I've got my borders where I want them with the offset that I want them. So with border number 1, that influences how far the border is from the lettering. Border number 2 influences how far border number 2 is from border number 1. And border number 3, the offset influences how far border number 3 is from border number 4. So let's do one other thing to this monogram. I'm going to select it and I'm going to go to my Advanced tab, and I want to change the aspect ratio. This has to do with how tall the monogram is compared to the width. And I'm going to change this to 1.5. That is going to make the height shorter. The width stays the same. And I pressed enter to activate that change. One last thing we may want to do to our monogram is to change the colors. And this is particularly critical if you're going to want to have the borders a different color, because there's not going to be a color stop at the machine. I'll hold the Alt key down and I'm going to select that second border by clicking on it, and I'm going to change that to color number 2. I'll hold the Alt key down and select the lettering, and I'll change the color of the letters. This monogram is now ready to save and send to the machine. So even though you can select just a very simple monogram from the Design tab, you can really edit it in many ways to make it your own. The next thing I want to go over is creating a large monogram for just a pillow or something that you would place on a larger project, perhaps a tote bag. I'm going to go to New Blank Design, and actually we're not going to use the monogramming Docker for this, so I'm going to close out of this. Now, as you're probably aware, we can work with both embroidery fonts as well as true type fonts. And I'm going to show you how to download a font from a font website. I have already downloaded this font. You would want the software closed before you download the font. But I'm going to open up my download folder, and you can see this is where the folder or the zip file is. And I'm going to delete this file here, so I will extract the zipped file. And it's very important that you follow these steps, otherwise it doesn't install correctly in your software. So this is the file that I downloaded. It's a zipped file, and a very important step is that you right-click on that zip file and select Extract All. A dialog box opens and you can browse to the location where you want to save that folder, just to be simple here, I'm going to extract that folder and it's placed in that same download folder. So here is the folder. Notice it is no longer a zip folder, but a file folder. I can double click to open that. And I'm going to select the TrueType font and then right click on that and select Install for all users. It's very important that you go through these steps with Windows 10. That is the correct way to install a font so that it shows up not only in embroidery canvas, but also artwork canvas. So now I'm going to create my letter and I'll right click on the lettering icon. And the first thing I'm going to do is locate that font that I just showed you how to download. So with that selected, I'm going to type an initial in, and I'm going to change this to a 4-inch tall letter. Click OK, and then click on screen to activate. Now you'll notice with this letter selected, I don't have access to a lot of the craft fills and the other types of fills. And in order to have access to those, I must break apart the lettering. Break apart is found in the edit toolbox, and I'm going to scroll down and select break apart. Now I can hold down the control key and select those larger satin stitches and change them to a lace fill. If I deactivate show, show outlines, I can zoom in and you can see that the outline is not complete around the lace fill. And that is because the software figures out a way to create that lacework fill without any jump stitches. So in some cases, there's not going to be an outline around the design. But we can add the outline by going to outlines and offsets. And there are two types of outlines that we could add. One is object outline, and I'm going to check object outlines. I'm going to select a color that is the same color as the lacework fill, and I'm going to select common outlines. Now I'm also going to check offset outlines because I want to put an outline also a little bit away from that letter. I will use an offset of 0.079. I'm going to change my count to 1. I want a triple stitch, and then I can select the color that I want and click OK. And you can see that an outline was placed right along the outline of the lacework fill, and there is an offset outline around the letter as well. Now we're not done. We're going to embellish this letter a little bit, and we're going to embellish it with a pattern fill. So I'm going to right click on Pattern Run, and I'm going to click on Select, and this happens to be in the Nature category. So I'll select Nature, and this is pattern 117. I'll select OK and OK again, and go to the Digitize toolbox, the Open Object tool, because I'm going to create a straight line. Remember, with Open Object, you can do right or left clicks. If I want a straight line, it's going to be 2 left clicks. If I wanted to put that around the curve of the letter, I would do a left click, a right click, and then a left click. But with a straight line, I'll click with the left click, hold the control key down to keep it on plane, click again, and then press enter. Now I can press escape to deselect the tool that I had selected. I can select that, and I can change the color. Now, pattern outlines are directional, and they depend on which way you click. So I clicked at the upper level and then went down. But after clicking and setting the stitch, I can also simply click on Mirror Y, and that will turn the design around. This file now is ready to save and send to the machine for stitching. For this last exercise, we're going to be creating a monogram border from a stitch that is on your machine. So I'm going to open up the simulator, and you'll go to your machine, put in a USB stick in the port, and select the stitch that you want to transfer. This particular stitch was in pattern 101, pattern folder, and it was stitch 159. So you have it selected, it appears on your screen. Then I'm going to go to my personal program and save that design. Now it defaults to the machine folders. I don't want to save it in the machine. I want to save it to my USB stick. So I'll click on USB, and you can see that I've saved this a few times. All I have to do is click on confirm, and now it is in my USB stick. So I'll take my USB stick out of the machine, bring it to my computer, put it in my computer, and then navigate to the location of the design, which is on the USB. So I'm going to click on Open Design, and I'll find my USB stick. I'm going to select that design and click. I will open that design, but before you open it, you'll want to go to Options. You'll always want to make sure that Leave Stitches as Individual Stitches is selected, not Convert Stitches into Object Shapes. The stitch will convert very accurately if you choose Leave Stitches as Individual Stitches. So I'm going to click OK and click on Open. And then just click OK in the non-native dialog box. I'll draw a bounding box to select that stitch, and then go to Settings and Create Pattern. Now, if you've never created a pattern before, you'll first need to create a folder. And I do that by clicking on Create, and you can call this Machine Stitches. I have a folder. That's where I save all my machine stitches. I'm going to cancel out because I already have that pattern set. So I'll click on the drop-down arrow and choose that particular category. Now for pattern name, I just type in the name of the stitch. And I'll click OK. I've already saved this, so I'm going to go ahead and just overwrite the one that I saved. I want to look at the status bar, and it says enter start point of the reference line. So I'll click at the very top of the stitch, and then it's asking to enter the end point. I'll come down and click at the end of the stitch and just click OK in my pattern dialog box. And then I can delete that because it's now been saved in my software. For creating a border, we're going to also create a custom border. And for this, I'm going to go over to Artwork Canvas because there's some neat shapes in Artwork Canvas that you can create and then transfer those into a border. For this, I'm going to select my basic vector shape icon on the left side of the screen, and then select the perfect shapes icon in the middle of the property bar. The shape I'm going to select is called a scallop border, or will be called a scallop border, and then I just click and drag. Now it doesn't really matter what size it is, because remember the size of the border is determined by your lettering, and it's spaced a certain distance from the lettering. So you don't need to worry about the particular size that you're creating. It also is a single line of stitching that we use, not a satin stitch when we create our border. It is automatically transferred into a satin stitch when it becomes a border. I'll just click on Convert Artwork to Embroidery, and then go back to my Settings menu and Create Border. Again, the border set, you can have a custom border set. That's if I need to create it, I'm going to click on Create first and name that set and go OK. but I've already created a custom border, and I'm going to call this I can't type, Scalloped Border, and click OK. Once again, it's going to ask me to enter the start and stop point. So I'm going to put the start and stop point right there and click OK. And now I can delete that border. Now, to create the monogram from our custom pattern as well as our custom border, I'm going to go back to the monogram dialog box, or the Docker, and I'll click on monogramming to open that up. And I'll go to my letters, and actually for designs, I'm going to scroll down and just select a type of lettering style. So it can be any one of these lettering styles, whatever style you choose. And when I click on that, I get my letters on screen. I'll go to the lettering tab, and I'll change these to my initials, and they populate on screen. Then for this, I'm not going to add ornaments. I'm going to have that fancy border, so I'm just going to go to the border tab. And I can add, delete, or change a border. In this case, I'll use add. And you have borders and you have diamond borders. And then I'm going to go to my custom border category, select the scallop square, or actually when I created it here, I called it scallop border. So I'll select that and click OK. And you can see that even though I saved it as a single stitch, it's now a satin stitch. Now, for outline type, I want to navigate to the pattern runs because I want to use that pattern run or that machine stitch that I brought into the software as my pattern. So this defaults to the default pattern. I'll go to my properties bar, and I will select the select button. I'll click on my machine stitches and select pattern 159, click OK, and OK again. Now, you'll notice that the pattern didn't work exactly like I wanted it to on screen. I can go back into my object properties, and remember, I can manipulate the size and the spacing. So I can decrease the spacing and work a little bit with this to see if I can get it to work okay. I could also change the size and apply that, and just keep working until you get something that will work. And that looks okay there. So by using your up and down arrows and just trying different settings, you can get it to work so that it looks like it's not jutting out at one of the corners. This design then is ready to save and send to the machine. And Julie, do I have any questions?
Thank you, Debbie. We have a couple questions here. Let's see. The first one is, can you show kerning again?
Sure. Let's say I wanted to kern these letters. I'm going to hold down the Alt key because I just want the letters. And then I'll select reshape. And this is an elastic letter. It's not going to quite kern the same way. So let me go get another one. I'll go back into, and let's get just a straight. Okay, so I can go into reshape, and I have diamond control points. Now, because I had an elastic letter, I don't have those same control points. So you can kern with straight base. And I can just click and drag and move a letter one way or the other along the baseline. Now, if I want to move it off the baseline, I can move it off the baseline with the shift key. So I'd hold the shift key down and I can move it up or down. So the shift key and click on the diamond, or if you want it just along the baseline, you can just click and drag on that diamond shape and it will stay on the baseline. But that is kerning. And it can be done to monograms. It can also be done to lettering that you've just typed in for lettering only.
Okay, great. And then have you ever seen a monogram in a way where you can incorporate a number, like the second, the third, Julie Bridgman the third?
No, I never have. But you could
I don't think I
probably
have either.
go on Google and they would give you recommendation for doing that type of monogram. I didn't run across that type in my research, but I imagine you could find something if you Google monogram with the third or the second.
Right. Yeah. If it's out there, it'll be online somewhere.
Right, right.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, that is it for the questions. Thank you, Debbie, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Tomorrow you will receive a follow-up email from GoToWebinar with the recording. Also, in a couple days, the webinar and the handouts will be available on Bernina.com. You just click on the Learn and Create tab at the top right, then click on Classes and then Webinars. If you have any other questions, you can email me or Debbie. On behalf of Bernina, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Julie.